So one thing that's really important when it comes to when you're creating any custom application is your application might grow to a certain decent size, and there's going to be a lot of hard-coded random values that you might have told it to do because you like a certain UI style. But the issue now becomes is I just wasted. So for example, I told it to make a really simple change and it failed, right? And this is Claude. Like I think I'm using Opus right now as the model. So even as something as capable as that is, I don't even know what the recommended, what the default is, right? It's Opus 4.8, but even that is not dumb, but it just didn't do what I asked it to do in a very simple way. I told it to turn all these orange icons right here, right? Before it was gray. All the placeholders for any of the users' icons, they were actually gray, and it kind of looked weird. It didn't fit with the theme. And so essentially I told it like, hey, can you go from gray back to the orange that we had previously? Very simple change, right? All you have to do is change it here. Obviously, in certain locations, when you go on the user's profile and you click on their name, right? If you click on the user's name, there's also here, it's also orange here. And right, this should be a circle, not a square. All that to say, it ended up changing a few things in certain areas, but not all of them. So what I did was, so example, what was wrong? You restore brand orange profile avatars, commit was live, but it was incomplete. It fixed the shared avatar fallback component and a few pages, but the home feed avatars and 15 other areas are hard-coded gray initials. Now, why are they hard-coded? They shouldn't be, right? So they were never converted. And so it fixed it, but it didn't even fix the other issues. So what I would do now is I wanted to create a skill file to avoid doing hard-coded, and I thought we had it. And this is where you would have to kind of refactor. Refactor just means kind of organize your code base again, go through all the files, all the skills, and understand where it's getting all this information in this data from. Can you please do me a favor? Can you write a skill file, or a skill file that would make sure that whenever we're making changes or refactoring changes, and I tell you about UI components or even logical components in our application, that we don't hard code values unless we really need to, right? Most of the code should be dynamic. It should never be hard coded. Issues like this, where I told you to do a simple task like going from a gray avatar icon back to orange, should not have failed the first time around, right? Instead, it restored in some areas and didn't restore in others. Let's create a skill file. So in general, when we have any hard-coded values, that we try to consolidate and make them into a unified area first, right? So this should have been just a commit in one area, right? We should have like a UI file, whatever that talks about. I don't know how the UI is handled right now, but essentially, if it should have showed like profile icons or avatar icons, and that you should have just changed the gray in one area from gray to orange, and it should have trickled down to all the other changes, right? Instead, the code would have to make 16 changes. That seems a little excessive, right? We need to unify this stuff. So we need a skill file in general, anything, not just avatar icons, but other stuff. If I told you on the home page to make sure that we display a different share icon, or if I told you like, hey, let's change the message button to something else. Like another change I noticed is like the book now button is black. It should be orange, right? Like the inquire now, it shouldn't be black. These changes are something that need to be unified, right? You shouldn't have to make hard-coded values and changes. So let's write a skill file. So any ask I always ask will always determine like, hey, let's try not to hard code UI values or any other component or any logical values. Let's try to make it sure it's dynamic, and let's make sure we use standard, the best coding practices, right? But let's go ahead and make sure that's a thing, and then make sure that we don't have these leftover hard coded values that you have in the 16 areas that you were mentioning. So that is something as simple as creating a skill file, and again, I might be prompting it wrong or not optimizing it, but all that to say, these are the kind of small things that really make a big difference, because again, it failed the first time, but if I told it again, it might have failed the second time. If you're not closely paying attention, sometimes there's times where I make small UI tweaks like that and I'll ask Claude, and it might get overwhelmed with all the different files and the context and the skills that you mentioned it, then it might fail in multiple different times, right? So you need to go ahead and try to organize your code base, and that's what I'm going to try to do right now. And it's pretty important to do this, right? So let me create, I think I was opening up a terminal. This is really important for me to do. So I think I told it to do this, but I have an admin dashboard, right? for my website that I can go ahead and do admin work from anywhere that I want, right? And it's like if I want to delete products, if somebody listed a really inappropriate service or anything like that, I quickly can delete it off my phone, right? Now what I want to do is I also want to organize this. This might just be a local thing. So let me open up a terminal, and this is something that wrong image. Let me just double check that this fixed this, and then I'll go ahead and prompt it in this. I don't need to create a new products. Oh, let me check it on my phone actually. Profile products. Let me refresh. Didn't look like it updated. Cookies and site data. Let me go ahead and try to do this again. Okay, let's go ahead and sign in. Didn't work. That's annoying. That's another thing. A super small tweak, right? So what I essentially told it to do was, oh, maybe I didn't push to prod. That's why. Enhancements. Let me check localhost. That's my bad, actually. I should have checked localhost. So a few changes I told it to do. Products. Okay. It did end up adding a few things, so it might have updated. So let me just tell it to push to prod. Push to prod. Okay. Let me get another terminal before I start doing anything else. What I want to do is essentially what I want to do. Let me close some of this stuff. Update the cursor. Let me open up the terminal. Right. Spin up another terminal. Where'd it go? What's going on here? CapCut, let's close this. Let's close this. I'm going to start using that. Close all that, close that. Let's open up, okay. So Claude, a good way to bypass those prompts is set it to auto permission so it doesn't keep constantly asking you to hit yes or no. Okay, now, can you please do me a favor? Can you create a HTML file, and I want this to be constantly updated. Maybe later I'll host it somewhere, but I essentially want to know exactly where all of our code base and all the skill files and how everything is organized on the back end side of things, right? So I want to essentially see nice visualizations, maybe a graph or like a hierarchy, like a tree or something like that, that tells me exactly where all the UI components might live, where we are keeping the skill files, how we're keeping the design elements up to date. Like essentially for what I want is like if I ever made a change and let's say you didn't end up following my style guidelines, I want to see which skill file you pulled in. I want to know where you're pulling in data from, and so I can essentially make it better so you know exactly where to go, which skill file to use. If the code isn't refactored or something is broken that was fixed before, or if you're making a mobile UI change and it breaks the viewport and it's off the screen, I want to know where you're pulling in all the design changes from, for all the skills from. Everything else within our app, I want to know exactly how it's organized, how we can make it better, what are the industry standards, but I want to know if there's any files we're missing, or if we have too many files, or if there's things that are too bloated, or everything like that. So can you go ahead and try to create a nice, beautiful HTML for me that includes everything for our code base, right? And audit our code base as if we were somebody who was trying to buy a startup, right? If you're owning a business or whatever, a software company, and you're trying to overtake the software, understand how our code base is set up, and obviously find out the industry standards, what's good, what's not, and what we can do better. Audit everything, organize everything, but don't actually make the changes, but just tell me what changes we would actually need to make, and I'll tell you to approve them or not. But I want to create a nice visualization first so I can demo this to like stakeholders and tell them like, hey, this is our code base, this is how we built everything out, and then we'll go from there. So that's a really important component to do, is when you need to act like this is a business, right? Whenever you're creating or whatever, and it's nice to tell it to like, hey, if I had to display this to somebody or tell this to somebody or show it to somebody, how would you do it differently? And this is the way to do it. So after it's done with that, I'll try